When you think of historic Spain, this is probably what comes to mind, right? These incredible, breathtaking buildings. It's a testament to a civilization that feels as permanent as the stone it's carved from. But what if that story, the one we all kind of know, with its heroes and villains, what if it was actually put together long after the fact, for reasons that have almost nothing to do with what really happened on the ground? All right, so that's exactly what we're going to dig into. We're going to deconstruct the story of Al-Andalus, or what many people call Moorish Spain, and look beyond the legends. First things first, let's just acknowledge what's right there in front of us, this absolutely incredible legacy. Think about this. For nearly 8 centuries, 800 years, a vibrant Islamic civilization called Al-Andalus was a hub of science, art, and culture. And the amazing buildings that are still standing today are proof of that. But that simple sentence hides a much, much more complicated reality. So let's start with maybe the most fundamental question. When we use the term the Moors, who are we actually talking about? Well, the word Moor comes from the Old Latin word moris, which basically just meant dark-skinned. And for centuries, Europeans used it as this kind of catch-all term for the super diverse groups of Muslims who ruled the area. But, a blanket term like that can sometimes hide more than it reveals. So let's zoom in on that one key moment, the invasion of 711. Now, if the picture in your head is a giant army of Arabs sweeping in from the east, you might want to adjust that picture. And this is where it gets really interesting. It turns out that initial force was overwhelmingly Berber. We're talking like 70%. These were the indigenous people of North Africa. The Arabs, while they were the leaders politically, were actually the minority in that army. And their role was absolutely crucial. The Berbers, or Umayyad as they call themselves, were the real engine of this conquest. In fact, their general, Tariq ibn Ziyad, was himself a Berber, and he's the one who gave Gibraltar its name. Jabal Tariq means Tariq's mountain. They got the toughest jobs, settled the toughest land, and were truly the backbone of this new society. Now let's just think about that timeline again. This wasn't some short-lived kingdom. We are talking about a civilization that lasted almost twice as long as the United States has even existed. It's a huge span of history. And it wasn't one single static empire. Not at all. It kicked off with the conquest, grew into the powerful Emirate of Cordoba, and then later shattered into a bunch of smaller kingdoms called taifas. And all of that happened before the very last stronghold in Granada finally fell in 1492. It was constantly changing. Okay, so this long, complex, ever-changing history, it brings us to probably the most famous and definitely the most controversial word connected to this whole period, the Reconquista. A Spanish philosopher, José Ortega y Gasset, pointed out how kind of absurd the term is way back in 1921. His whole point was, look, can you really reconquer something over 800 years? The word makes it sound like a quick, unified mission to get something back you just lost, not centuries of wars between all these different kingdoms. So what was really going on? Okay, in the Middle Ages, you definitely had Christian kingdoms in the north trying to conquer Muslim lands in the south. That part's real. But this idea of a Reconquista, this grand national mission to recover a unified Spain that supposedly existed before 711, that's a much more modern invention, mostly cooked up in the 1800s to create an origin story for the modern nation of Spain. And here's the kicker. You almost never find the word Reconquista in medieval texts from the time. It was applied to history much, much later. It was a way to take a really messy and complicated history and frame it as one single, heroic story of a nation taking back what was rightfully theirs. It's a powerful story, for sure, but it's a major oversimplification. But what happened after all the fighting stopped in a certain area? I mean, history isn't just about the conquerors. It's also about the people who stick around, who adapt, and who create something totally new. As the Christian kingdoms pushed south, lots of Muslims just stayed put. They lived in their homes, but now under new rulers. These people became known as the Mudehar, which comes from an Arabic word that sort of means tamed, or those allowed to remain. And they did a lot more than just remain. And you can see this blend in the buildings. It's incredible. On one hand, you have that classic Moorish style of the Alhambra, but then you have the Mudéjar style. This is what happened when Muslim artisans started working for Christian patrons. They used all their traditional skills, like that amazing tile work and brick patterns, but applied them to Western building styles. The result was this incredible fusion, something totally new. It wasn't one culture being erased, it was two cultures blending together. So what's the big idea here? Why does it matter what we call it or who exactly was in an army 1,300 years ago? Well, it matters because the story of Al-Andalus is a perfect example of how history isn't just what happened. It's also about how we tell the story of what happened. The words we use, the parts we focus on, they're often full of the ideas and the politics of the people telling the story, long after the events are over. By pulling apart these simple myths, what we find underneath is a much more complex, much more interesting, and ultimately a much more human story. It really makes you think, doesn't it? If a story this famous is so full of myths, what other parts of history do we need to go back and look at with fresh eyes?